The best the West has to offer has led us to the upper finals here, where Method EU squares off against their North American counterparts. I'm Automatic Jack, and joining me on the desk is Sloot, Nagura, and Tettles here. Now, we talk about Method EU quite a lot, but they've yet to drop a map this week and the previous week here, Tettles. Do you think this is going to be the series where Method NA could take a dungeon, much less a series, off of them?
No, I think we were talking a little bit backstage, and I talked to Gingy a little bit earlier. He said that they are confident that they're going to play well and that they're playing on top. In addition to that, we've seen them make a couple mistakes. We saw some in the Underrot, but beyond that, I believe that Method EU is playing to a caliber that Method NA cannot keep up with, and because of that, I actually believe that Method EU will take the series 2-0.
And as we're moving on, first dungeon into Toldagor here. Sloot, this has been a dungeon Method NA has had some struggles with. Some of the fancier strategies and runs that they've tried to put in just haven't seemed to come up for them.
Yeah, there's been some talk about, you know, why are you pulling so much trash prior to the cannons? Everybody really just focuses on the cannons. Minimal trash, get 20%, proc your first reaping, and then 80, sometimes even 80+% into the cannons we saw in previous weeks. So we'll see if they change anything up. Certainly they had a bit of a nightmare scenario with Jess Howless 2 weeks ago. Fortunately, no Sanguine for them, but you know, if they stick with it, hopefully it works out and it pays off. But a lot of the times you just see these direct kind of, you know, Zerg strats, get to the cannon as quick as possible, then we'll deal with the trash.
Yeah, and we've seen, you know, some struggles with those bosses without a doubt here. Now, when we look at this, Nagura, we had some of the previous runs for Toldagor. A lot of issues with Korgus and having to deal with those doubles, a lot of extra deaths accumulating here. Any way that they're going to be able to further mitigate that, or is this going to be good play on your end?
I think it's just going to be good play, and also, you know, Toldagor is different than any other dungeon, so I think anything could happen in this dungeon as well.
And Method EU with a massive lead in the Twitch poll. No surprise here for our #1 seed. But game one in the upper finals between Method EU and Method NA starts on Toldagor.
Very good to be back. I'm going to be curious, honestly, to see if Method NA changes any of their strats, if they deemed it something that just didn't work for them in the previous time they did it, or they just, you know, screw it up and they're confident that it's going to work out this time. Nonetheless, both teams mass stealthing straight through to the Sand Queen. No extra trash on top of this one. We are now in a bursting environment. Only way you can get rid of this bursting is either to, well, outranging is really the only way to do it outside of any immunities or pre-immune. So they're going to have to be careful with what trash they kill upstairs with the cannons, but once we will get to that later, as the Sand Queen is 86% apiece. No bloodlust on either side, though, Nagura.
Yeah, they're probably going to wait for this upheaval that is happening right now, and once the boss comes up again, they will probably use their bloodlust, I assume. It is a tyrannical setting on a +9 team, so bosses do have a lot of HP. Now, the upheaval, she will borrow once in a while, and then she will target a player, and once she comes up below that player, she will do a lot of damage to this to them if they actually get hit by it. Now, it is dodgeable by, you know, using an immunity or just being really fast, using your blink or something like that.
Yeah, no, oddly enough, a pretty late bloodlust there from Method EU. She only comes up for about 40 to 45 seconds right after the upheaval ends, and they waited about 10-15 seconds there, so might lose a bit of that bloodlust timing. Perhaps they were waiting for the parasites to spawn just so they make sure they cleave them properly. Now, once, of course, these drones, the parasites, do die on the side, Sand Queen will get a buff of about 5%, not about, but actually 5% on the dot, stacking enraged damage. So yeah, wasted about 5-6 seconds of bloodlust here, popping it late for them. But she comes up and they get the last few hits out as upheaval hits, and they get ready to keep cleaving everything down together, moving well as a unit. Both teams actually doing the exact same strat, making sure to localize all of those traps on the ground.
Yeah, Method NA choosing not to use their bloodlust. Now, you can only really use 2 bloodlusts in this dungeon anyway, and one of them you want to save for the last boss because it's just so dangerous. So they do have time to use it maybe in the second boss, because that's the one where they have been struggling earlier. But one thing to note as well here, that Shakib actually got hit by one of those sand traps. Now, the traps that spawn, they spawn the drones out of them. If you walk on top of them, you actually get stunned and you get a lot of damage. So Shakib dropping really low, getting hit by the sand trap, needs to make sure that he you know, cleans up the play a little bit, make sure not getting hit by things like that, because they're totally avoidable.
Lighty doing well there to roll out of the group and transcend back into position just to get the boss in position as quickly as possible for these sand traps that are forming on Method NA side. Even with that happening, Nagura, and what you said, plus the fact that Method EU used their bloodlust, it's only a 5% difference between the two teams. So maybe Method NA could make some better use from their brother squad with that bloodlust upstairs, likely in just Hallis' room. predicting, in my opinion, at least second phase. Jess Hallis is what I'm seeing here for the 70%, but they could very well use it on trash in that room. Method EU finally down Sand Queen, and they head over to the sewers, use that rogue pick lock, and get down in the grates. We will see kind of a pull for the Thug here to the side.
Yeah, so they actually chose to skip those parasites, just running through them, and now I assume they're gonna shadow melt all the mobs after they just skipped, or shadow melt and vanish. And now, yeah, as you can see it coming out right now, they still only have the 4% from earlier. Now we see the double step, which is a choosy, so everyone can just walk past without getting encumbered with those mobs. We're probably gonna see even more skips coming out here, so they go into the upper room. One thing to mention here as well, that there's those cages on the side, which if you open them, you actually gain buffs. So that's probably what we're gonna see from the rogues coming out here. They're just gonna stealth around, open the cages, trying to get the buffs for the group.
Definitely some important buffs too. There's attack power, there's arcane intellect, there's fortitude, so important buffs to kind of just, roll over into the dungeon with and have a lot of extra buffs that will get the trash killed faster. Not as effective, of course, as on the trash because most of the cannons will do the job there, but really just for the high tyrannical health bosses, especially leading into Korgus at the very end. Method NA, here comes finally their Bloodlust. Pretty big pull coming up for them on Jess Hallis's floor right now. A lot of casters that need to be interrupted. Specifically, you want to make sure that the Sea Speakers do not get their Water Dome cast. It will provide an Absorb Shell on all of the mobs around them. It'll just take way too long to chew through everything for these Alliance teams that don't have offensive dispels with Arcane Torrent.
We saw Method EU dropping really low here as they triggered a bunch of bursting stacks on the group, which of course we have bursting and necrotic, two very dangerous affixes, especially in combination, because necrotic of course is a stacking debuff on the tank that will decrease damage, decrease healing taken, and if you get bursting on top of you, which just is a damage ticking dot, then it can be very dangerous for the tank.
Ooh, that was scary. Method A Nerf Clap dipping below 10% health there with all the bursting in combination with the damage over time fire from the Arsonist plus the necrotic stacks. We have, of course, in this necrotic environment, so any successful melee on there at targets will add a stacking damage over time bleed plus 2% healing taken debuff. So the tanks, I mean, they have to start getting at around 20-30 stacks. It gets too lethal, and if the DPS kill things too quickly and too many bursting stacks accrue, which is of course another 4-second damage over time on the group, can only get away from that by outranging it a substantial, I think 60 yards, something like that, Nagura. You have to get quite far to get away from that bursting. It could be quite lethal for the tank, and it almost cost Nerf Clap his life, but they did manage to stabilize. Method NA moving here really well as they deal with that first Reaping wave, and it seems maybe they learned from some of the other teams' mistake. They don't want to pull the Reaping on top of Jess Hallis and have that combination where Jess stuns everyone at 70% and then ends up in a tank death because of the accrued Reaping stacks.
Yeah, they actually proc the Reaping and pulled it on top of this pretty massive group here with some Sea Speakers, some Arsonists. So very well done by Method NA here to deal with the Reaping and the pack at the same time. Now they are on 30% trash and are already engaging Jess Hallis, while Method EU is still trying to proc their first Reaping wave as it happens right now, and now engaging Jess Hallis as well. Now they pulled the boss kind of at the same time, Method EU just slightly behind. Now one thing to note again is that once you have 20-ish% trash, you can go to the cannons and deal with the rest of it with the cannons. So Method NA, even if they have more trash at this point, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be much faster.
Hopefully Method EU manages to kill this Reaping wave, and they do, just because we don't want that combination mentioned earlier to happen where the group gets stunned at 70%. It's quite lethal for the tank. 79% now in Jess Hallis for Method EU as Method NA is approaching their transition at 70%. Will hit the group with a stun and run around to the various cages in the complete floor, the U-shaped floor, if you will, opening up all the cages, getting some extra mobs to spawn, which will be dangerous for the tank as that's more necrotic stacks. They will pack into the corner once the travel is done, and make sure to interrupt in line of sight the flashing daggers as well. After that, really it'll just be a struggle to keep the tank alive and help them reset stacks. Likely to see some Ring of Peace come into play there.
I actually really liked this tiny little strategy by Method NA where they were dragging Jess Hallis towards the very first cage that he would open in the intermission phase. Because, if he gets stunned right next to the cage, the boss doesn't have a lot of room to move to the cage, and then he'd gain just like maybe a second or two, but it's such a small advantage, but I just like it for those top-end teams to do those kind of things.
This is actually a really clever play from them. They avoided most of the mobs, and they actually aren't even tanking the boss outside in the hallway. They went back into Bobby, the sibling of Jess here that joins the fight in phase 2, and sat in his cage that has a little kind of nook in it in the corner that you can use to line of sight that fear. So they're kind of trapped in the cage, or they're trapped in the cage with them, that it's just a really clever play, actually. I'm kind of blown away by this. Working excellent for them. Just Hallis at 9%, getting ready to line of sight again for this flashing daggers here as needed in the nook that we just mentioned. We're wanting no last-second deaths on the team. Bobby's well interrupted, has nowhere to run as well with his fear. Just stellar strat here coming out of Method NA as they down the second boss and are already headed off. Method EU doing more of a traditional strat that we were going towards with the line of sight here in the corner at the beginning of the hallway.
Yeah, definitely safer and better strat coming out of Method NA here compared to the last time, at the last tournament where they had a lot of struggles here in just Hallis. Now playing it a lot cleaner, not having any issues at all. Now we see the skip coming out with the Shadow Melt from Method NA side. Well, Method EU just downed Hallis right now and probably going to do a Shadow Melt skip as well.
Yeah, Method EU certainly on the heels of Method NA here as they get ready, waiting for their skip towards the cannons. We can see Nerf and Lighty patiently waiting for the rogues to kind of do their rounds. Method EU doing the same in the doorway here, waiting for that necrotic to drop on now as they shadow meld the rest of the trash off. And onto the cannons we go as Method NA starts to rush in, picking up everything they can. They let the rogues go ahead first to deal with the 2 trash pack that was on top of the cannon. The tank then runs through Nerf Clap and pulls a ton of trash with them on the way.
Yeah, that was actually really smart. Just Nerf Clap and Lighty just waiting downstairs, letting the rogues and the healer deal with the trash that is already in the hallway. And therefore, Nerf Clap and Lighty, not only do they outrange the bursting because they're really far away, but they also are in position already to pull the rest of the trash. So very smart play in this Toldagor by Method NA, definitely improving their strategy here compared to last time around. While Method EU, of course, is also at the cannon part of this dungeon, and we've been talking about this cannon part a lot. Now, what really happens is the rogues are jumping into the cannons, they will trick the tank before they jump in, and then they will just kill off those mobs with the cannon blasts, as we can see in Method EU right here.
Method EU still camping, some of them at least, still camping in the main jail room as they sit there with Fish Feast, spamming themselves to help so they can heal through the bursting stacks that are accruing outside from the cannon. So really good healing play by them as now finally rears up and grabs a lot of the trash outside to the cannon. Method NA already at 70% of the trash. Really well disciplined here. Instead of ping-ponging between the 2 cannons that we saw one of the other teams do yesterday, they actually wait between cannon shots for the bursting to reset. So they never get more than 2 to 5 bursting stacks. Even though the members do not outrange the bursting, they just kind of sit there waiting to support and heal through it. The cannon patiently waits until everybody's healed off, the dot drops off, and then they keep rummaging on the trash. 75% now Method NA, about to proc the 4th Reaping. Method EU with a huge pull here as well, wanting to catch up.
Yeah, so Method EU and Method NA, of course, making use of both of these cannons. We see Yoda drop really low because he's got aggro from some of those mobs. Of course, if you're in the cannons, you still get aggro. So if you don't get the tricks done properly, or you get caster attacks you with something, you can definitely die. That's why we see the cheat death proccing from Yoda here. But again, they're just going to use, they're making use of both of the cannons, one on the right and one on the left, with both of those rogues trying to get them in the middle, the mobs in the middle between them, so both of the cannons can shoot them at the same time.
And unfortunately, Yoda does go down, just barely trying to hang on there at that 1%. No dice, though, as they have their first death of the series and the match. Rogue goes down. They're going to have to wait for that res in just a moment as they finish off the rest of the trash, wanting to hang on to that battle res. Here comes the res now from the Method NA side, as Method EU is looking to catch up, but Zalia goes down, and there's no active battle res prepared for Method EU, even though they have 2 available. So the DPS are going to have to try to kill the rest of the sauce, but there's no dispel for now, as he gets so much damage chunked on him from the dot from the Risen Souls. Barely hangs on, manages to clean it up, and his Somebody's bargain trinket procs. Not going to have that available for 6 minutes, but does die now in the end. Mears finally is able to res Zalia, and he will have to res now after that. Lot of time lost here for Method EU, as Method NA has already started on the 3rd boss.
Yeah, so Method EU just had too many bursting stacks on the whole group. Zalia just dying to this very last tick of bursting, and of course without a battle rest available to them with their healer, that now just dying to those Reaping Souls. This is going to cost them so much time. Even if they recovered now, they managed to get out of combat, they managed to rest Zalia and the tank back up, but 2 deaths and a lot of time lost, while Method NA already is on Valeri here, already on 65% boss HP and on 89% at enemy forces. So Method NA definitely on their way to win this dungeon here if they continue this way.
Method EU certainly on the back burner here. Knight Captain Valeri at 60% for Method NA, and we can see here, Nagur, we talked about it earlier, despite their late Bloodlust use, 1 minute 40 on Method NA's Bloodlust. Certainly they'll have that up for the last boss by the time they get up to Korgus on top of the tower, or the jail tower essentially. 55 for Valeri now, as Method EU has only engaged with the boss. Now, there is some efficiency you can gain on this boss by making sure you pre-move her to the corners opposite of where the explosions are going to go. She is largely immobile a lot of the time because she just casts so frequently. It's really frustrating to move her. Sometimes she even sits between casts, staring at the tank before she starts her second cast. So you want to get her out of the way quickly so that the melee have access in these heavy melee meta comps to get the DPS in on her. Both teams looking to do that quite well here, but still 35% difference between the two teams and an extra death on the board for Method EU.
Yeah, definitely Method NA on their way to win here if they don't make any mistakes from now on. Now, the only thing left between them and winning the first game off of Method EU would be a little bit of trash and the last boss. Now, the last boss is very dangerous, and that's why we see most teams usually save the Bloodlust for the last boss, but here Valyria about to go down, then we're probably going to see a skip coming through from both of those teams because they want to kill the boss first to not proc the Reaping Wave, and once the boss dies, they want to go back and finish up this last little bit of percentage that they need. One thing to mention though is that Method EU actually has a little bit more trash than Method NA, meaning they need a little bit less cannon shots at the very end to proc this last Reaping. But they do have one death more, so 5 seconds difference as well.
So here comes the CC from Method NA, the crowd control as they finish off Valyria, the third boss, starting to head upstairs, but I think Lighty got into the cannon actually, so they're looking to finish off some of the trash, but not the two wardens, or maybe they're actually looking to finish everything off and then shadow meld it right at Korgus' room, so they don't want to waste the inefficiency or have the inefficiency of needing to backtrack over the terrain back to the cannon after Korgus. So a bit opposite what we've seen other teams do. Nonetheless, 5% left on the board for Method NA, who will proc their 5th Reaping here, and I'm not sure if they're going to have the space to fully shadow meld everything, Nagura. We'll have to see in a moment. Nonetheless, the final two wardens are about to die here, and the last Reaping Wave coming up in just a second as they CC, they root. Oh, very clever by them. They root and they crowd control the final warden, just barely below 10% health, holding him there for the remainder of the fight as they run up to Korgus and prepare to pull the last boss, getting that Bloodlust out right away. And this is for the first game here. We could see the first Method EU game dropped over the course of 2 cups. Method NA looking largely dominant right now as Korgus is just sub 90% and Method EU's only starting their trash up to Korgus.
Yeah, so Korgus is very dangerous boss. Now, there is some things that can go wrong here because we talked about this. And JB is actually going down. They do not have a rest. They need to reset the boss. They need to try again. This is a disaster for Method NA. They were on their way of winning against Method EU, the very first game to take away from them. And now they have a team wipe coming in. They have to reset because they don't have a battle rest for him.
This is an absolute disaster here. They wasted their Bloodlust and all of their cooldowns. No trash that they can efficiently backtrack for right now as they killed off most of it. Nerve Clap's Trinket is procced on the way out as well. Won't have that available for 6 minutes, the remainder of the dungeon, as Method EU is looking to capitalize on this mistake, pulling Korgus now, popping their Bloodlust, and just trying to get him down as quickly as possible. They've already dealt with their 5th Reaping Wave, so once this boss dies, it is over for the match.
Method EU engaging Korgus now as well. Now, they can't make the same mistake as Method NA here. They can't have Xaylia down because there is no battle rest available for him. They do have one rest though, so if Xaylia survives and someone else dies, they can get him back up. Now, but this boss, there's a bunch of very difficult mechanics that you need to look out for. Now, we have the explosive burst, which we can see on both sides of the screen coming out right now, which will target 3 players and do a lot of initial damage once it procs, and then also apply a dots to the player. Now, there's a little bit of RNG in this fight, and you can get doubles pretty much, which means that the explosive bursts will come really close to one another, meaning that the healer only has very little amount of time to heal the players back up so they don't get one-shot by the next application of explosive burst.
Lighty doing really well there to keep paralyzing the Ashvane Warden in the bottom of the screen. That's the last trash mod they'll need to kill in order to proc their 5th Reaping. Obviously waiting until the end of the fight to do that. Don't want to deal with the Reaping on top of this boss, but anything can go wrong. If Lighty goes down and he doesn't get up in time, that CC breaks, anything can happen. Method EU now at a 54% on this quite long boss fight in the tyrannical setting that we're under, dipping a lot of health based on those explosive bursts that Nagura talked about, but doing well to rotate the Deadeye shot and move around for this cross ignition, something that is honestly quite hard to see in the tank position that now is in at the moment, which is why we see Nerve Clap on the Method NA side kind of travel down the stairs a couple of times during that just to make sure he has good vision on it.
And we actually see a double coming in on Method EU side right now. That's why we see fragments dropping so low. Actually, Sally is trying his best to heal everybody up. Now, actually going in cat form a little bit too, trying to weave some of those dots, cat weaving a little bit, getting the damage done. A 6k DPS actually coming out of Xaylia while healing is very dangerous fight. Well, we also see some damage coming out of JB's side here, but Kroger's just on 31% compared to 45% on Method NA side, which is a pretty big difference on a tyrannical setting. We see Lighty drop so low.
So low right now. He's their CC. He's going to have to get healed back up. Didn't have the Transcend available after he got knocked back with the Explosive Burst. Not only is there a damage component over time with that, but it will knock you back as well. So if the melee don't have their back or they don't have an instant travel, they will have to just manually run over, losing some DPS time, but also gaining some stack of that. Zayla getting chunked quite low as Method EU spreads out
JB
for
died
the crossing
again.
addiction, and JB goes down for Method NA, and that is going to spell it for them unless Method EU has a disastrous sub 10% wipe here. It looks like Method EU really is going to dodge a bullet here. Full wipe coming out of Method NA. We almost saw the first game that Method EU dropped, but it just wasn't enough. 6% left here on Korgus, and Method EU is going to brush a bit of sweat off their brow. That was a close call, but they are going to take the first game. Nagura, you're speechless.
Yeah.
And I'm sure at this point Method NA might be speechless as well. So close to taking a game off of Method EU, and the most simple of mistakes just sunk them on that. And what we were hoping was going to be that one game that Method EU would drop their titles, and it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, man, that was an impressive match by Method NA. Basically, they had a 19:30 time in Toldagor for their time trials, and they were slamming that dungeon before they ended up having that wipe towards the end of the instance. Whenever it goes to like the story of the match and the story of that map, they ended up pulling the whole entire boss's room, and they ended up getting a second lust, or their first lust was a little bit better than the lust on the side of Method EU. Additionally, they end up tanking Jess Hallis in this nice jail cubby, allowing them to line of sight the house a little bit easier. You also sight on the side of Method EU. They end up spamming eating that fish feast while the people are outside using their cannon. So that was really cool innovation on the side of Method EU. But then Method NA looked like they were just going to be a little bit of ahead, because you do see this death from Zalia here. They ended up looking like they were going to be behind just because of that death coming in for him. And then towards the end of the instance, you do end up seeing JB getting hit by that cross ignition and ended up falling.
Yeah, there's a little mistake there. I believe it was one of the shots, one of the sharpshooters that actually ended up taking down Zalia while they were on the ramparts there. And I think there was something like 40-50 stack that now had left on him that they just couldn't dispel because he was down, so spelling a couple of those deaths. But let's talk about that JB death right at the start of Overseer Korgus that just pretty much through the rest of the dungeon for them.
Yeah, so basically they were standing here pulling Overseer Korgus. You do see JB out here in the corner. He moves for the cross ignition and just gets clipped here by the cannon here, and he ends up dying over it. Of course, JB is the only battle res available for him on his team, and he ends up just going down, ruining their chances of beating Method EU and what should have been like the most clean run we've seen from them, Toldagor. I know we've been pretty critical of their Toldagor, but honestly, they really shaped it up, and it looks like a really good dungeon for them.
Probably if any Toldagor. I mean, those are really
that
impressive
was impressive
strats. I was blown away with their Jess Hallis strats in the cell. That was really cool to see.
Yeah, and at that point, that was probably the most massive improvement from a dungeon that we've seen, completely readjusting, rethinking how they were executing on to that. And it really would have worked out for them if they were able to play it 2 or 3 more times or something like that. You really would have seen them pull ahead on it. But as we move on to the next matchup, that was only game 1. They have time for their own redemption here, as we're going to have Atal'dazar as the next series coming up here, Nagura. And this is one that has been very open. You've seen not too much variance in terms of strategy, but how aggressive teams are going to be able to be on this one. I can't wait till this one.
Yeah, me neither. And we haven't seen either of those teams actually played this week yet. We've seen it a couple of times last week, of course, and in the time trials last week as well. I do believe Method EU had the faster time compared to Method NA in the last week's time trials. But of course, this time around, we have different affixes and we have one level higher. So anything could happen, and any strategy could happen, could come out of these two teams here.
Yeah, now we know that Method NA can take these games off of Method EU. We did see them kind of becoming human, showing some humanity here on this one. So don't go anywhere, guys. The next game coming up is going to be on Atal'dazar, Method NA versus Method EU. Method EU narrowly taking game 1 from Method NA just off a simple death on that last boss here. But now we're moving on to game 2 to decide who is going to be moving on to those grand finals. My name is Automatic Jack, and joining me here is Sloot, Nagura, and Teddles here. After that performance by Method NA, death aside, they had such a strong Toldagor here, and it really shows that they're showing up here to play against Method EU here, Sloot.
Yeah, and you know, the biggest thing that I'm taking home as Method EU from that match is not that, oh, you know, we had a rare screw up, we are human, but we're going to storm the rest of the dungeon and win it anyway. It's that, teams are actually starting to step it up and compete at our level. I mean, Method and A had an almost flawless run, just a hiccup at the end that cost them the match, but I mean, time and time again, it's going to prove that teams are starting to rise up to the Method EU bar that they've set, and it's going to make for some interesting games.
Yeah, and that's a mistake, especially with the compositions as set in stone as we've seen them. One death, last boss, no run back opportunity. Even worse, that you have to deal with that crippling poison that the boss puts onto you. It limits your mobility. It's something that could happen to any team on this one. So at this point, they need to shake it off and need to show that they're ready to keep on going because they're in the upper bracket. They still haven't lost a series yet in this tournament. Method NA versus Method EU. Game 2 here on Atal'dazar.
You know, on Atal'dazar, we always kind of tote this dungeon as being really open, but realistically, there's the only variance that we get sometimes is where do you kill Razan? Razan sometimes is killed as second or third boss, but for the most part, you don't see the Colossi pulled. You see minimal honor guards pulled, and you always see this first pull up here to the left.
Yeah, we actually see one small adjustment here from Method EU. They actually pulled this once. No, Sally died at the very start. This is actually a disaster for Method EU because they do not have a Resolute standing on this ledge here. That means the Juggernauts are going to be charging into melee because the only eligible targets are melee targets now at this point. Thankfully, Sally managed to get back so he can jump up on the ledge again. So, okay, thankfully now I had some big cooldowns here and they did have the Bloodlust but Sally falling down again and the Juggernaut kills him right now.
Oh no.
Choking here. Sally fell off the ledge, the Juggernaut charged, and now they might just have a full team wipe here.
Yeah, this is rough right now. I mean, there's Sanguine dropping. They have to start kiting the mobs. Chargers are going to be going all over the place. Volcanic is hindering some of their movement as well. Now sub 10%, just barely hanging on. He tries to run away. Mears goes down. Gingy already procced his cheat death as well. Frag barely hanging on at 30. Xaylia starts to finally stabilize some of them, but Gingy finally falls. Frag goes down. Cheat death goes off, and Mears is about to fall again as they kite everything up the stairs. This is a disaster. Fragnance goes down as well. Method and A already cleanly running through, proccing everything they need to on the ledge, snapping some of the swords, and getting right on Razan. Method EU still kiting around desperately in circles right now to try and finish off the rest of this, but those early deaths on Xaylia were just absolutely I mean, they might have just kind of sunk themselves into the grave already.
Definitely. So we kept talking about Sally, how good he is playing, how he just recently came back into WoW again, how he used to play other esports as well. And he did such a good job throughout those weeks. But now in Toldagor, he was the one dying. He was the one that cost him so much time there. And now again, Sally just dying twice in a row, causing them to lose so much time here in this dungeon. Now they need to recover, need to get back. While Method and A is already on Razan on 70% HP. Now they proc the Reaping Wave, pull it on top of the boss, which, you know, Razan, not a very dangerous boss fight as long as you deal with his two main mechanics, which is the Fear, as we can see them dodging it right now, or line of sighting it rather. And then you have a Fixate, which fixes one random player, and you just need to run away because if the boss reaches you, he will pick you up and eat you, and it does a lot of damage, so you want to definitely avoid that one.
You avoid it, and of course we have the Shadow Melds and Vanishes going off there just to make sure he's stationary. That Fear is every 30 seconds, so the Warrior will have access to the Berserking, excuse me, making sure that they're just kind of immune to Fear, getting a bit of extra damage, and now really low health right now as they jump in with some of that fall damage. Razan not on a very favorable patrol pattern for Method EU, as they kind of need to run all the way across this boneyard at the bottom just to pick him up and get him back to the corner. Valuable seconds lost on what was a pretty atrocious start to the dungeon for Method EU, especially with the kind of caliber they've had here in the tournament so far. First Reaping Wave coming in, running down the stairs on top of Razan and on top of now. Method and A 13% now on Razan, looking to finish it off along with the two Sky Screamers that they pulled from up on this ledge, making sure to well interrupt it, and they're moving on in a second.
Yeah, we saw Maris also going down on a later pull here when they pulled the swords. I think there's too many swords jumping on Maris and he just went down. They didn't lose too much time of it except the death, of course, but it's piling up at this point. 30 seconds difference just from deaths alone, while still being one whole or half a boss behind at this point. Method and A downing Razan, having 27% trash. Now they're on their way to this right side of the room, which does have some very dangerous mobs in, especially those honor guards, which we're probably going to see them skip as we saw the blind come out here.
Yep, Method and A moving up right now, getting ready to pull these shield bearers. A lot of efficiency that can be gained here with the shield bearers. Want to make sure that that you interrupt. You have to hard crowd control their bulwarks of Juju that come up, and the tank needs to be in range for those shield bashes, else they will turn around and hit the next highest target, highest aggro in proximity target. Excellent play there for the bulwarks. Barely got off for not even a second. They do reduce all damage taken by 90% for all the mobs around them. Had the gouges well timed there by the rogues as they look to cleave everything down and kite along the edge slowly here to make sure that the sanguine that goes down does not heal the remaining mobs. 31% on the board for Method NA. Will soon be proccing their 40% Reaping Wave and carrying it over to... now, I think in the previous week they carried it over to Vol'kaal, and we were kind of saying, I don't know if that's worth it, but 39% on the board for them, so they're just shy of the Reaping. Will likely go to Vol'kaal first and then proc their 40% Reaping with that dangerous 6-pack downstairs Nagura at the gate.
Yeah, so before they shrouded, of course, they needed to use their Shadow Melt because they were still in combat with those honor guards that were just being blinded and succeed. So now they use their Shadow Melt, use the Shroud to go to Vol'kaal, and Vol'kaal, again, not a very dangerous fight, especially not in a 45 setting. But in the very first phase, you see those totems here, and Vol'kaal very similar to those honor guards that they skipped earlier, which are very difficult to deal with in trash. But this boss in general, not so much. Now, the only thing you have to do here in phase 1 is make sure you kill those totems within a very short amount of each other, because if you don't, then the totems will heal themselves, and then you don't get access to Vol'kaal's HP and to his phase 2.
Doing well to interrupt the boss there. If you let that full channel cast go out, you actually get 3 stacks of the damage over time on the group. 1 is inevitable. Believe me, I tried to interrupt at 0.001 seconds and it just doesn't work, but 1 is inevitable. Certainly don't want to get 2 or 3 as they enter phase 2. As Nagura mentioned, of course, most teams don't opt to use their bloodlust here. The boss does kill himself with the aura whilst damaging players with it, and they want to make sure that they end up near the gate, but not right at the gate when the boss dies, because it will go down and they could easily proximity aggro the double honor guard and witch doctor pack just outside. Method and you clawing to try and get back towards Vol'kaal right now. They're still dealing with the honor guard packs that we saw Method NA deal with just a moment ago, and I mean, they haven't even started the Vol'kaal fight. 49% here for Method NA.
Yeah, Method EU losing Mayors one more time, so one more death on their board as well. 35 seconds difference now. They did have to use their battle rest as well, so now they're out of battle rests. If they have any more mistakes, they can't get any player back up. They did proc their Weeping Wave here, compared to Method NA not proccing it yet, which means they're most likely going to Shadow Melt it here while doing the skip and the Reaping skip and the Trash skip at the same time with 1 Shadow Melt, engaging Vol'kaal at this point. But they're just very far behind because Method NA killing Vol'kaal now, and they're on their way to the next Trash.
Yeah, they're going to stealth right through here and go to the what is one of the most dangerous packs in the dungeon if they pull all 6. There are 2 Stalkers that patrol in stealth here up and down the stairs. They're going to grab those and combine them with the double Shield Bearer and double Witch Doctor pull. A bit of sloppiness that we saw in the previous series with a lot of those hexes going out, so you want to make sure you're getting as many interrupts on those hexes as possible. And should one get off, okay, that took a bit long for the bulwark there, but should one get off, the player does need to get outside and make sure nobody else is in that green ring. But doing really masterfully here, Method NA about to proc their 40% Reaping Wave, which they will combine with this and cleave it down, maybe even with the swords outside, depending on how quickly they finish up the remaining shield bearers here. Method EU just about to start phase 2 on Vol'kaal. They have a bit of an advantage in the sense that they've done their second Reaping Wave already, but still 7 deaths on the board, plus only starting Vol'kaal now. This is going to be a big mountain to climb.
Most definitely. Method NA in the lead here as they open the gate here, pulling the Sky Screamer and those sword packs. Now, the sword packs are pretty dangerous because they jump around on random targets and they will do a splashing damage around them, which is pretty significant damage. And if you stand too close to another, then it can do damage to multiple players at the same time. Now, one thing to note as well is the Sanguine that they're dropping, of course, once they're dying, and you can't really control where they're dying because they're just constantly jumping around. So a little bit of a problem with Sanguine here as well.
56% on the board for Method NA. Getting ready in a moment to deal with the third Reaping Wave. We'll see if they combine it with anything. Yoda ends up getting his cheat death proc there just because of that random sporadic splash damage from the swords that Nagura just mentioned a moment ago. So not going to have that available as they perfectly sit with 59% trash with the option now to proc their third Reaping, and likely they will take it into what will be a probably pretty dangerous sword pull, maybe even a double sword pack pull along with the Sky Screamers. We can already see they've marked the moon on the Sky Screamer. So here they go. 10 sword pull plus a Sky Screamer. That is a CC'd. It is sapped in the background. A lot of damage coming here on the group. A lot of CDs popped as they absolutely melt this sword pack. Just a lot safer for them now to deal with the remaining Sky Screamers.
Ooh, So Yoda actually going down here. They're probably going to use the Battle Rest because we have the Reaping coming in here as well. So Method NA, no Battle Rest here. First mistake, first death coming in from Method NA from an otherwise very clean dungeon. Now they are pulling those Skyscreamers that they succeed earlier, pulling it with the Reaping Wave, and actually this next pack here, as you see Nerve leaping into this pack. Now the Skyscreamers, they are not very dangerous, but you need to interrupt them once in a while because they cast an AoE fear. If it's not interrupted, then your whole group will be feared, and that definitely spells disaster. So you want to make sure that you assign a melee for each Skyscreamer. That's why they're being marked with those squares, triangles, so you can sign it up properly to the melees. And then, of course, this group does a lot of tank damage as well.
So we saw Jinji's cheat death proc there for Method EU as well on the small screen on the left. I think he got shield bashed actually because now is kiting backwards from one of the shield bearers just as that shield bash came up. So kind of, well, not obviously an actual death, but he's vulnerable for the next 6 minutes now as we see a snap come in from now on Method EU side. Needs to make sure to get out of there the moment Sanguine drops, which is right now as the swords die, and he just plants a few of them on the side. So well played there by them as Method NA grabs the last 2 honor guards, finishes them, not honor guards, excuse me, the last 2 mobs, they're honor guards are those very evil mobs that nobody wants to deal with upstairs. 77% on the board for Method NA, looking to proc their 4th Reaping into what we've seen them do a huge pull here. Most teams do a huge pull here with the 4th Reaping Wave plus this big pack in front of Priestess Alun'za.
Okay, so they actually still have 10 seconds cooldown on their Bloodlust. I'm not sure if they're faster than they usually are in their practice runs because they can't pop their Bloodlust immediately on this pull. They need to delay it a little bit, and we're probably going to see it right now. There we go. And now he has to finish up these mobs. This is a pretty substantial pull, and we see JB probably being in this corner that you can't see in the camera right now, just kind of standing on a ledge that is not available to the Juggernaut, so they will kind of just cancel out their charge, which is pretty important because if anyone gets hit by the charge, it does a lot of damage, but it'll also charge away from the group, meaning that while they're away, they're not getting hit by any of the AoE. Just so much more efficient to keeping them in the group and getting the AoE damage.
And JB is forced to jump down, of course, to help with Typhoon, moving the mobs out of those incoming Sanguinis on the ground to get as much, or as little healing, excuse me, as possible on the mobs. Priestess Alun'za now pulled with the 80% 4th Reaping Wave for Method NA that masterfully chews through that trash in front of Alun'za. 95% trash on the board. They do have a two pack to the left of them that will give them another 4% or so, and then they'll have 1 mob left over just at the boss. We'll see how they want to deal with it, if they want to proc their 5th Reaping before Yasma, the final boss. But for now, all eyes on Alun'za. Quite a simple boss. You just want to make sure that all of the members of your team have blood pools soaked before the boss casts transfusion at 100 energy, else you will actually end up healing the boss instead of damaging the boss for 5% per tick, which is really where the bread and butter of damage comes in on this boss.
Yeah, so one more mechanic we can see here in the back of the screen on the Method NA side are the Spirit of Gold. They will spawn periodically throughout the fight, and if you don't succeed them, if you just let them run, then they will go to those pools and actually deplete them. So you want to make sure you succeed them somehow, as we see the blind and the root come out. And now Method NA also pulled 1 extra mob here, the Augur on top of the Priestess, which will be not the last percent, not 5%, but once they kill this mob, they only need 1 more Skyscreamer to proc their last Reaping Wave. And Priest Alun'za about to die here, and then the only thing in their way is going to be this very last Skyscreamer and the very last boss, Yasma.
Augur dies perfectly on top of Alun'za as planned. Method NA heads back down the fire gauntlet. Method EU relentlessly just keeping going, trying to top this off as much as they can. Bloodlust has come out for them as well. They proc their 4th Reaping Wave ahead of this large pack and then combined everything together with that Bloodlust. 83% on the board for them, 85 now for Trash, as they have 10 seconds left on their Bloodlust, but they're just so far behind, plus the extra 6 deaths. 30 seconds worth of death timer for them as Method NA is already starting the RP to open up the stairs to get up to Yasma, the final boss that sits ominously at the top of that pedestal, watching the players dodge the spiders up the stairs.
Yeah, so Yasma should be no problem for these kind of teams here, especially in a fortified setting, but you still gotta watch out because if JB dies, they do not have a rest to get him back up. We don't want to have the same thing happen again like in Toldagor. We want them to finish this dungeon cleanly. One thing to note as well is that JB, right? JB pretty much lost them this last Toldagor because he died in the last boss. Now, this can be very bad for a player's mentality, but we see JB actually just you know, not thinking about it, playing well, not having any mistakes so far. We only saw 1 death from Method NA, so very good recovery from this whole team from a mentality point of view, and just good on them for recovering so well and not making any mistakes in this dungeon.
No, JB certainly playing up to snuff here on this dungeon. Don't want any of those negative thoughts at all, Dazar. As JB, they do well here to move as a pack. Now, we've seen this from all the other teams. They move as a unit, especially in this heavy melee comp, to make sure that they're constantly kiting these spiders that occasionally enrage and fixate on one of the players when they turn bright and purple, chasing to their position. So eventually, by the end of this fight, they're going to have a large round of spiders coming in. You don't want to touch them to do an immense amount of shadow damage and leave a pool on the ground. So the players will position at 100 energy on the boss, just outside of the boss's reach with those mobs, but that's not very lucky timing as we see the spirits being formed, but also the spiders chasing the players out of position. So well done there by Lady to get that Ring of Peace down and keep the mobs away from the boss, because if they hit that boss, that's a lot of damage on the group.
Most definitely. And you see those spiders just being placed in very good positions. That's why Yasma is getting kited at the corners of the room and at the edges of the room, because those spiders, once in a while, they will activate kind of. They will get bigger and chase those players, as we can see it happening right now on Method NA's side. But once they're not fixating you, they're just kind of chilling their position and walk around a little bit. So if you move the boss too fast, those spiders will stay behind, and if the boss is across the room or the players are across the room, they will start moving in weird directions and the whole room will be filled with them. So you want to make sure that you're controlling those spiders properly, as we see them actually engaging the Sky Screamer here as well, which is the last percentage that they need, and then they will actually take off a game of Method EU here.
Yeah, it is a Method Eat Method world out here at the MDI right now as Yasma is about to fall, and the last Sky Screamer, 40% on the board. Finally, Method EU has been beaten by Method NA, nonetheless. So it's going to be a tied series in this Battle of the Titans.
Method NA coming back after a heartbreaking loss here on Toldagor, and they take a game off of Method EU, sealing that victory there on Atal'dazar and maintaining their life here in this upper finals here. And we all know JB's an emotional player. We've seen it on streams or just, talking to him previously about how much he cares about this game. Coming back into it after such a heartbreaking wipe, he had such strong composure going into this one, Tettles.
Dude, he actually just tweeted out a little bit ago, maybe I am a choker. And the story of Method NA for this is they actually just ran this Atal'dazar incredibly clean. We saw Method EU falter really hard at the beginning, and Method NA just had a clean run. They only had one death across the whole entire dungeon, and they ended up being able to just... They ended up winning because of Method EU's mistakes, but at the same time, they had an incredibly fast Atal'dazar.
Yeah, in their own right. I mean, it could have been pretty competitive with Method EU on this one. Not to say that it was just because of that first wipe, but overall, their improvement has been massive so far.
Yeah, and I wanted to say exactly what Jack said. I just want to kind of voice that again. It wasn't, I don't think Method EU would have had it in the bag for sure, should they not have had that. I mean, Method NA played exceptional here. And not just that, it wasn't even the initial kind of boo-boo that Method EU had. Even throughout the dungeon, Nagura mentioned it a couple times. Mirrors would die a couple times here and there. They accrued an extra few deaths just randomly through the dungeon. Method NA only limited that to one. So, I mean, if it wasn't for the hiccup in Toldagor, this would have been a full sweep from Method NA. That's how close it was. That's how much they've improved.
Yeah, and at this point, we're going to be going to Game 3. But before we do that, let's take a little look at that first wipe that Method EU had here, Tettles.
Yeah, so basically Xaylia ends up going down twice. So he gets killed right here, just accidentally takes too much damage, gets hit with one of the Juggernauts, then he gets hit with one of the Wildfire casts and gets incredibly low and dies again. And then we see his group ends up just dying to attrition because Xaylia's not there in order to be able to keep them up. Now has to kite away. They end up just losing people, and they end up getting 5 deaths occurred at the very first pull of the instance.
It's heartbreaking to see that early kind of wipe, and last time I saw this is when Sloot went down on some pull like this one.
If only if I would have been healed, Jack.
You don't need one heal. Not maybe like 30, but as we move on to that last game, we got Waycrest Manor coming up here, Nagura. And so far today, Sanguine hasn't really been too much of a problem for these teams.
Well, I think it was more Grievous and Fortified that has been a problem for the teams in general. We saw some of those big pulls just, tanks dying on the big pulls, just falling off immediately. But yeah, Waycrest, just a very difficult dungeon in general, and we didn't see any of those teams played yet in the tournament, so this time around with the new affixes. So we'll see what strategies are coming out for them here. Method EU the last time around had this strategy where they would backtrack afterwards, and they were actually much faster than they were in practice, and then they didn't have their Bloodlust and managed to wipe when it was very last pack. So we'll see if they change up their strategy, actually keeping in mind that they're going to be so fast and not actually have this bloodlust at the very end.
Yeah, we got to keep in mind that whoever loses in this series is going to go into the lower finals. So they have to go against King's Rest and Shrine. Some dungeons we've seen some very, very bloody games in here. So before we go on to that game at 3, we'll take a quick break. Method NA and Method EU tied up in the series, and we'll be back right after this. Method NA bouncing back after a tough loss in the first game, taking game 2 here in Atal'dazar and tying up the series. Now, game 3, guys, as we move on, is going to be in Waycrest Manor. Now, Tattles, now that we've seen a little bit of balance between these NA-EU teams, who do you think is going to be taking this last one?
I think Method NA is going to end up taking it.
Really?
Yeah. I recant my Method 2-0 prediction, and I think Method NA is going to end up winning.
All right, nice little swerve here.
He's just a floozy.
I
He just does whatever he wants all the time.
He's like, man, things are not going in my direction. Let me bounce back and go full reversal. Nagura.
Sticking with the U, of course.
Yeah, all right. I am shocked and or appalled and salute.
I don't know, man. I think Method NA is just on a tear right now. They're feeling it. You know, they had that hiccup. JB, you know, known to kind of have a bit of tilt sometimes. I mean, he just shook it right off, got right back into it. Just masterful performance in Atal'dazar. They're just in the zone right now.
Yeah, and that's what you want to see out of those veteran players. You know, him coming to land last year and being able to perform on that high level. That's what you want to see so much. And Waycrest Manor with Fortified Grievous Sanguine here. We talked about it a little bit with all of that extra damage going into some of those larger pulls here, Tettles. Where do you think would be the big wipe spots that we're going to have to watch out for?
So the maggots are actually pretty scary in Waycrest because of the Grievous effects. In addition to that, we want to see how people are dealing with the Matron in the hallway next to Soul Goliath. The reason for that being is we've seen a lot of teams ending up sanguining that mob because she ends up casting inside the sanguine for too terribly long and she doesn't move very well. So making sure that you get the dogs away from her and not sanguining her up is 2 places where you can actually make up a lot of time from some of the stuff that we've seen today.
Yeah, and at this point, I think it's going to be those big areas and having the Ring of Peace, being able to actually use that very quickly. We've seen other times where Tank just grabs the Matron herself and then just everybody else AoEs it down, so they're able to move very quickly onto this one. But Method EU Salute was really the first team that we saw make a real big tear through Waycrest Manor here.
Yeah, you know, the only time they had their hiccup, as Nagura mentioned earlier, was just they were too fast for their own good and didn't have the Bloodlust available. But, I mean, if I'm Method EU right now, you know, I know those players, I know they're composed, but they've got to be a bit shaken up by what's happened here so far.
Without a doubt here as we start up game 3 between Method EU, Method NA. Winner moves on to that grand finals.
I think a lot of this, Nagura, is going to come down to who handles the Sanguine best. You certainly don't want to Sang lose in this dungeon. Now, we already see that... What are you looking at, Jack? You already see that there's varying methods coming out of both... Well, method teams here. That actually wasn't on purpose. But EU goes straight up. And we know last time they did this dungeon, Nagura, they actually ended up pulling the 20% trash in this Triad wing and then dragging the first reaping on top of the Triad. So we'll have to see if they do that. Method NA has dealt with the first trash pack already and is now moving over to the top left.
So Method EU has now dropped really low because he has this debuff on him, which is not getting dispelled by Sally at this point. He did manage to recover, though. They did a little bit of a bigger pull. They pulled those Soul Essences on top of this Patrol that is running around here, and the Rune Weaver and the Guard. So definitely a scary pull coming in from Method EU here at the very start. Not using the Bloodlust either. This time the Curse actually got dispelled by Sally. It's very scary, especially if there's so many mobs hitting him at the same time. And now we see Method NA popping their Bloodlust on this big hallway pull. Yeah,
this hallway pull is really scary. We saw in some of the previous manors a lot of tank damage that goes out here and a lot of kiting needed in the end because of the Sanguine and the tight spaces, which is why Sanguine is such a nasty affix with this dungeon. Same big pull, if not even a bit bigger. They grabbed up the stairs as well. Method EU, not to be outdone, pops their Bloodlust as well in the hall. Jinji does not have his Cheat Death available, procced it on the previous pack, unfortunately. And I remember, folks, we are in Grievous. At 90%, you will start accruing a dot over damage over time, a dot that will stack up to 4 and can get quite tough to heal through, especially with whatever other residual damage is in the group.
Yeah, we see Method NA just finishing off this trash back here slowly but surely. Now, these mobs are just very dangerous on the tank because they just have so many nasty tank mechanics coming in and just this frontal cleaves that also need to be dodged by all the other melee players. So they managed to get, I believe it was 5% that they had earlier, so they managed to get 8% trash from this Bloodlust pull. Now moving on to the next pull. I do believe it was Arakidabra who just managed to pull this whole room here, while Method NA is doing it in 2 pulls a little bit safer, and Method EU already on this 21%, proccing their first reaping, on the way pulling Triad here. Now, of course, Triad very difficult boss on Tyrannical, but it is a 45 setting, so it shouldn't be a big deal for them.
Yeah, so exactly like the strat we saw last week from them. 21% first reaping straight on top of Triad, as Nagura mentioned. Now, we have a couple of Tormented Souls on the side. That does well. Mirror's there to drop that Ring of Peace and bump it back into the group. 2 rotations to this boss, as we know. Each of these sisters need to get dropped to 50% before you recycle the kind of progression on them. So you start with Selena, then you go to Malady or Milady, and then to Briar afterwards. Every time the sister is empowered, they will have a specific aura akin to them, and also a special ability that you need to look out for.
Yeah, the aura that is happening is the most difficult one is most likely Sister Selena's or Sister Melody ones, because Selena decreases the healing taken by everyone by 50%, and Melody just kind of applies a debuff to everybody that if you don't move, it will stack up and do more taking damage to you. But these active abilities that you've been talking about, once they have the Iris, usually teams have so much damage that they can skip this ability. Selena here does do a mind control, but again, just so much damage in this 45 setting. Selena is probably going to go down before the mind control comes through, and allied as Gingy gets mind control.
She gets uncontrolled indeed. Sister Briar for her first round for Method and A, who has as well procced the first reaping and brought it on top of the boss at 20% trash, but a fair ways behind, a full phase essentially behind Method EU at this point. Method EU's pulls at the beginning of the dungeon were just more aggressive, and they managed to pull them off, just getting them a nice little lead here. 0 deaths on the board for either team, but that might just, that might not come down to what matters. We do know how masterfully Method EU can do this dungeon. We've seen it in the previous week, so we'll have to see what Method have up their sleeve, but they already find themselves a bit on the back burner here.
Yeah, so Method EU on the last boss here, they pulled some of the trash on top those acolytes and those toads. Now, they wanted to make sure that they pull it at the very end of the boss fight because, of course, Sanguine, right? So if you kill one of those toads or you kill an acolyte on top of the boss and the Sanguine spawns underneath the boss, those bosses are very hard to move because they constantly cast abilities. So if the boss stands in the Sanguine and heals themselves, they're just going to lose so much time. So they played it a little bit safer, made sure they pulled the trash at the very end, made sure they killed the boss first and then the trash as they're moving on to this courtyard here, where there's a bunch of very dangerous mobs.
Yep, Zele going in cat form, they're having a little catnip, getting his energy and rather his mana back up for the pulls in here. Now, they grab all of the Jagged Hounds on purpose first because they have such a low amount of health compared to the rest of the trash in the area. Want to get rid of them as quickly as possible just to not have to constantly deal with the massive amount of Sanguine that goes down from those multi-packs. Method EU really smart here. They're trying to keep similar health mobs in chunks together, but Gingy gets smacked in the first death coming out of the map here as he immediately releases. They don't want to commit their battle res and will be running down to the freshly opened door that we saw was previously closed at the bottom left of the dungeon. But once you deal with Triad, that door will be open. Gingy should be back in just a moment here, as I think one of the Soul Fetish casts went off. We saw how much of a problem, did they not? I
think what happened was Gingy actually stealthed off and tried to pull the next boss, Ral, to make sure some more doors get opened, because if you pull a boss and then you reset the boss, some more doors will be open in this dungeon. And I actually believe that's what Gingy was doing. He was not in a group, he was away stealthing. Maybe he didn't time his vanish properly, or maybe he didn't manage to get de-aggro or something, so he died. I wonder if he actually managed to open the doors at all, because if he didn't, he will have to go again.
Looks like he did, because the doors are open, but he did die on the way. I actually thought he died just as he got in the group, because the range frame was grayed out for the player. Nonetheless, he did manage to complete his task of opening the door, but at the cost of his life. He's back now. 1 death on the board for Method EU. Method NA having just a go around here at this courtyard as well, but a lot of damage coming in the group. We've already seen Nerf Claps, Buon Samdi's Bargain, Trinket Proc. That won't be available for a while, and JB just struggling to heal through all of the various types of damage going out, especially that is rolling into that Grievous as well. A lot of 4 stacks on the group, so trying to stabilize here. Now as well has now procced his Buon Samdi's Bargain Trinket, leaving both tanks very vulnerable right now. They don't have access to that cheat death.
Yeah, a lot of those trash pulls are very dangerous, as we see Sally dropping so low as he has one of those bleed debuffs on him. Now, on top of this random AoE damage that you get in the whole group, you also get Grievous applied to everybody. As you see, everyone just dropping so low. Having those Gorgers jump around, applying the bleed, having the spit from the maggots on everybody. It's such a difficult task for the healer to heal up, as they proc the Reaping here and manage to finish up the last couple of trash, as they also pull the mini-boss here. So this is very dangerous, especially because it was so unstable just a second ago. cycle.
It was very dangerous, but they keep getting hit by some of the frontal wretch casts from the Gorgers. That is dodgeable. It snapshots your direction, and there were a couple of clips in there that were unnecessary damage taken as they try to kill some of the Sanguine away from Matron Brindle. Mirror's just so much damage gets chunked on him, gets down to 3% as Xaylia struggles to heal him back up, and now makes sure to kite Matron Brindle around, and the Gorges as well. We get a Typhoon out. Don't want that Sanguine under Matron. She is so largely mobile. We talked about this before the match. Really well done here by Method EU. Method and A about to proc their 4th Reaping, 36% on trash right now, but we see the Infected Peasant glowing blue, meaning that Soul Fetish cast did get off.
Well, this is very dangerous by Method EU here. They still have the Matron up here and now goes down, so they do have a rest available to them, and I'm not sure if they want to continue this build because Xaylia actually tried to Shadow Melt and get some mana back up right before they engaged this boss fight, but he didn't manage to get much mana back at all, and now Xaylia's low on mana, now dies again. They will have to reset this boss fight. They don't have a rest available. They will have to go again. Very questionable that they still wanted to go through with this pull while the Matron was still up. As I said, Xaylia just didn't manage to get his mana back up, and he was low, now was low. Very unstable here by Method EU.
Fragrance goes down as well. Gingy goes down too. 5 deaths on the board for Method EU. They just can't keep up with that Grievous healing. Mana is just an issue right now for Xaylia, not able to get that drink. 41% on the board for Method and A here on the main screen as they deal with the remainder of their 2nd Reaping wave. Trying to take it a bit slower with Matron Brindle as she's about 5% health, looking to finish her off before they make their next move, either towards Goliath or to clean up some of the trash towards Rawl's room. But indeed, Goliath is the next boss coming up, the one that we just saw Method EU have a wipe to. Now is back in action. Matron Brindle was kept alive, fortunately, so good heads-up play for Method EU there to reset the boss and not have the full wipe. Matron Brindle about to fall, and then they will get started as well on the Soulbound Goliath, who is now at 85% for Method NA.
So thankfully, Xaylia actually managed to stay in combat with the mini-boss here, as the mini-boss was already low HP. Of course, if Xaylia would have died and they had a full team wipe, then the mini-boss would have resetted, they would have healed to full HP again, and they would have to deal with that again. But Xaylia managed to stay in combat with the mini-boss while the whole group was regrouping, coming backwards. So I mean, they still lost a lot of time from this, though, because they just now engaged Goliath again, and Method and A already on 60%, and the trash is very similar. Now, you also have 25 seconds, that difference, so this is going to be very close between those two teams, as we see both of them fighting Soulbound Goliath.
Method NA at 54%. Just a reminder, again, not the most mechanically difficult boss here with Soulbound Goliath, but you just have to deal with the soul cage that comes up, making sure to cleave it down. Otherwise, just increasing damage stacks that accrue on the boss will melee and crush the tank, as an ability named Crush the tank harder and harder throughout the fight. At some point, unless you want to expend a mass amount of resources, you will likely need to reset the boss, which will cause a lot of fire AoE damage on the group. You can see some really big hits coming in on Nerf Clap here. He says, this is just a bit too much for me, runs the boss over into the fire. JB gets his healing ready. Tranquility comes out. Everyone's nice and healthy, and JB's going to have to kite these little red ghosts around because they are not targetable, and they will naturally grab healing aggro onto JB.
Yeah, so one more ability the boss has are those thorns. That's why we see JB going into cat form right now, because the thorns can target a random player that is not a tank, and if you're in cat form, you're actually immune to it. So the reason why we didn't see any thorns come out here was because JB was in cat form and was immune. So Goliath about to die here for Method and A. They do have their Bloodlust available in approximately 20 seconds for both of the teams. Now, we might see some big trash pulls coming in, or even some trash pulls on top of the next boss roll.
Yeah, so Method and A, 44%. There's a lot of trash here. Sometimes we see them just go aggressively into Rawl's room and then kind of deal with the hallway after. Sometimes we have the vice versa of that Nerf Clap getting really low as he gets that pull in there, just barely manages to intervene out. Ring of Peace comes down as a last-ditch effort defensively to make sure Nerf doesn't die, but he did have to get his Trinket proc there, so not the best of pulls coming out of the Method and A tank right now. Fortunately, managed to dodge death there with his Trinket. Bloodlust goes off into a quite sizable pull. Wretches are still being eaten as frontals. Not sure why they're not sidestepping those. Punt comes out as the first Sanguines come down from JB, making sure not to get a lot of the healing onto the mobs. Method EU has also downed Soulbound Goliath, doing a similarly large pull in the courtyard. Teams often choose to move out back into the courtyard during Sanguine weeks. It just allows you so much more freedom of space rather than the narrow corridors of the mansion where Sanguine can really fill up your real estate.
JB dropping solo, I believe he's got a lot of debuffs on him, a lot of speed debuffs. He did manage to recover though and heal the Grievous away on him. Now these pulls are very dangerous for both sides, as we see Method NA proccing that Reaping, while Method EU just needs to kill 1 or 2 more mobs to proc the Reaping as well. But this is dangerous because there's just so much trash, and also the Sanguine we have to mention, right? You can lose so much time from the Sanguine, even if you don't lose a player, you don't wipe. It's just so inefficient if those mobs are healing. So proper Sanguine management is the key here for this trash.
Now his Trinket now comes back off cooldown. He does have that cheat death available to him as they rush into Rawl's room, immediately pulling the boss along with the third Reaping Wave that we just saw Method NA do a moment ago. Reaping Wave really not too dangerous on top of Rawl, especially in this fortified setting. Rawl, stationary boss, just want to make sure to move out of those frontals that he casts. Otherwise, not very dangerous for the tank. Let the GUIs group up on the tank as well, give you some free revenge procs if needed. Both teams doing the exact same strat here, but again, we have to keep revisiting it just because of how hard these teams are running right now. 6 deaths on the board for Method EU versus NA's counterpart, 1 death. Those are going to come into play big time, especially because we know Nagura Method EU favors the strategy of killing Gorak Tool first, the final boss, and then heading back up.
Yeah, so Method EU actually pulled a little bit of trash on top of this boss here. We see the Steward with the skull marker on Method EU's side, which is being killed here. Now, they have to be careful, of course, with the Sanguine. They don't want to drop it anywhere near to this boss, of course. Now, Method EU slightly more trash percentage, especially after they kill the Steward. There will be approximately 5% trash ahead. And one more thing to note as well is that they're still having their Bloodlust. While Method NA popped their Bloodlust for this huge trash pull that they did where they dragged all the mobs into the courtyard. Method EU did the same pull, but they saved their Bloodlust, so they can actually catch up a little bit to them if they do a greater pull afterwards with this last.
That Sanguine is so close to the boss. I was actually worried for a second here it was going to be disastrous, but just far enough, preventing a bit of movement space, unfortunately, for the melee and the tank. Zayla is struggling a bit here with the Grievous stacks, just making sure to start focusing on the team. Don't want to get too out of hand. Everybody's now healthy and healed above 90. Just Zayla left as he gets attention put on now. Not a lot of space, though, because of the Sanguine that they dropped there, but nonetheless shouldn't be a problem for the melee, as Raw is at 16% now for Method EU. Method NA has dealt well with it, moved into the kitchen area along with the Steward that they had previously crowd controlled, and spawned the Rune Weaver Lieutenant that is in there.
Yeah, so the Rune Weavers, those witches that spawn throughout the dungeon are pretty dangerous. There are different types of witches, some of them more dangerous than others. The Rune Weaver can be dealt with pretty easily, as one of those casts is not very dangerous and you don't really have to interrupt it. That's why we see this Edge, for example, just go through, let her cast it so she doesn't cast any other dangerous abilities. We see Method EU managed to kill Ral now as well. They still have their Bloodlust available. I'm not sure what exactly they want to do with it later on, as they also pulled this Rune Weaver here in this room, and once they're done with this, they're still going to have a little bit more percentage compared to Method NA, but you know, they're still pretty far ahead, especially because of those deaths.
68% on the board for Method NA as they kite the Thorn Shaper out just a bit, grabbing another Mark Sister and the guard, the captain rather, not the guard, sitting in the corner. They look to get downstairs as quickly as possible, skipping Matron Alma, the other mini-boss present in the dungeon, who just takes so much time to kill that players just often try to ignore, distract her, stealth buy her, whatever it may be. Going down the stairs, 70% for Method NA, as they're likely rearing up to do a full room pull before the Waycrest couple boss, the 4th boss of the dungeon. Method EU following suit, 70% for them on trash as well, as they deal with 1 Thorn Shaper and the Rune Weaver upstairs in the kitchen area. Slight trash advantage for Method EU, and Gingy just struggling with that 4-stack. Zayla getting a bit more attention on Gingy, getting out of that 4-stack of Grievous as they head downstairs into the basement area.
Yeah, Method NA dealing with these trash bags in this staircase here. Now, they have to be careful with Sanguine, of course, because there's not much room to kite, because if one Sanguine pool is pretty much going to cover the whole staircase. So you got to be careful to only go in one direction and not kite backwards. As we see Method EU actually doing some sort of skip, where they skip some of the basement area, just go all the way down into this room, pop their Bloodlust, as you see now drop really low. I'm not sure if they want to pull the boss on top of it or something, but there's definitely a Bloodlust coming out here, and this huge pull as we see it happening on
I mean, they're definitely not going to have that Bloodlust available in Nagura. Remember, with the pack that they had upstairs last week,
yeah.
There's no way it's going to be up in time. So that's their last Bloodlust of the dungeon. Method NA might get a sneaky one in at the end of the dungeon as they do a full room pull as well.
And the boss.
And the boss comes in for Method EU here. You know, you don't need that much real estate with the boss. You just have to be careful. Once again, though, Sanguine. Got to be careful of the Sanguine. Got to be careful if there's any warding candles that drop, and constantly move the boss around. Otherwise, just keep the frontal pointed away from the melee. Reflect it whenever you can as the tank. And of course, these swirlies don't really deal too much damage, but it is is a bit excessive when you have the stacks of Grievous plus mobs on top of you. So now doing well there to move out of the way, grabbing the 80% reaping, 4th reaping wave, as Method NA does the same thing, but only pulls the boss with the reaping wave. So the team's pretty neck and neck in terms of percent. Slight advantage to Method EU, but they also have that 25-second difference to overcome.
This is actually such a scary pull by Method EU coming in. Not only do they have phase 1, which applies, there's just random damage in phase 1 of this boss fight coming in from Lady Waycrest, which constantly applies Grievous to the whole group. As we can see, all of them just dropping low, Sally having to deal with all this Grievous, while also having to deal with Dispelling now. And you see those Tormented Souls, a lot of caster reaping mobs, which constantly cast those Grave Pulse on random members, which again applies Grievous. So very dangerous pull from Method EU coming here, but they seem to be dealing with it pretty well. They only have one last soul left alive, so well done by them. We see Sally also dropping very low on mana because this was such a healing intensive pull that they managed to pull off here. Now Lady Waycrest actually joined the fight now too for the last phase. We have both Lord Waycrest and Lady Waycrest available to them now. Now they want to make sure that they cleave them down pretty much at the same time for maximum time efficiency, and then they can move on. But for both of those teams, they do not have enough trash percentage left before the last boss, so both of those teams will have to backtrack after killing the last boss and get the last percentage upstairs.
They certainly will, as now dips just a bit low with Lady Waycrest in the mix. Trying to cleave as efficiently as possible, as you said, but oftentimes teams just try to get rid of Lord Waycrest first. It actually looks like Lady's going to fall first here for Method EU. Lord Waycrest here at 25%, falling rapidly now as well. Method NA not far behind, as Lady Waycrest hits 3% in just a moment. Lord Waycrest at 30%, so they're just a bit behind in terms of raw dungeon progression, but they still have that plus 25 seconds in their favor because of Method EU's deaths. Now dipping really low here, very dangerous trash pull with these horrors. They need to work well to have a proper round of crowd control. You can see the Ursul's Vortex goes down first. We're likely going to get a round of stuns soon enough from the Shockwave and the leg sweep. There's the leg sweep right now, and after this the Ring of Peace goes down as Zalia hides safely behind the Ring of Peace, looking to finish off these Gloom horrors before they get another round of jumps off. Otherwise the healer can easily die.
Yeah, they need to make sure that they have enough damage before the CC runs out. As you said, we saw the Ring of Peace come out, but the mobs are about to die here. Sally is just making sure he's the furthest target away, as now is almost dead, and we see Sally also getting a jump, almost getting one-shot here at this point. This is a very difficult part, but they managed to recover, thankfully. So now they're 91% trash. They're on their way to pulling the last boss. Sally got a drink off, so to make sure that he has enough mana. And yeah, so the last boss for both teams and the rest of the trash. Now Method EU pulling the boss, of course, a little bit faster than Method NA, but as you mentioned, they do have the 25 seconds difference here. So I think Method EU needs to be a little bit faster still. I don't think this is going to be enough yet.
Not enough yet, and they just barely give any time for JB to heal them up through the 4 stacks of Grievous as they drop down a million Fish Feasts and just eat as quickly as they can and get started right on Gorak Tool. Advantage here also for Method NA having that Bloodlust available in 70 seconds for them, so that's going to be pretty big as Method EU just looks to chew through Gorak Tool and the Slaver minions as quickly as possible. Slavers need to be interrupted for the Death Lens so that they don't stun a player for 5 seconds. You can do that with pretty much any form of crown control these days, and you want to make sure you kill them before Gorak Tool hits that 100 energy so that somebody could grab one of those torches on the side and burn the corpses with them. A bit of grievous trouble coming in here for Method EU. Zalia is perhaps overcommitting his offensive value, but no problem in the end. He's aware of what's going on, stays on top of the Grievous, not the Reaping, and Fragnance gets healed above 90%. Method NA, 47% on the boss. Bloodlust available in 30 seconds.
So I think Method EU actually had 3 slavers up at the very same time. Now those slavers also jump around sometimes, kind of like the swords in Atal'dazar, and they will do splash damage around them. So since it's a full melee comp, if they jump around into melee, it's just going to be damage on the whole group, applying this Grievous on the whole group. That's why we see Sally just having to use this Tranquility here coming out. Now Method NA is not very far behind at all when it comes to boss damage here, especially because, and they will still have their Bloodlust at this point. So it will all depend on this trash pull. So after this boss is going to go down, they will have to wait for the NPC to spawn. They have to go back up the stairs. They talk to the NPC, they get teleported to the entrance, and then they will have to pull any sort of trash pack. Now the difference in Bloodlust is going to be pretty huge for this.
Yeah, I mean, Method NA just caught the single target damage there.
Yeah.
Their rogues just, I mean, a phenomenal amount of damage. Must have gotten some good 5 rolls there on the rogues as everybody, both teams, head downstairs desperately to pull the remainder of this room. We've seen Method EU do this pull and wipe to it, claiming that they did not have their Bloodlust available, so they've hopefully well practiced for dealing with it without access to the Bloodlust. Method NA doing the same pull as Nerf Clap, grabs everything in line of sights it around the corner, getting ready with that Bloodlust as soon as they come through that doorway, and now it's just a huge race to who can kill this trash first. Method NA need to do it 25 seconds faster than Method NA as they have their Bloodlust popped as well.
Method NA dropping very, very low on this pulley as they manage to walk out, line of sight all those mobs, so they come back out as we see those traps lying all over the floor. Now Method EU already 97%, they just need to kill 1 or 2 more mobs to get this 100% trash, but as you mentioned, Method NA has 25 more seconds to make sure they finish this off, so as long as they don't have any big sanguine heals coming through and any deaths coming through, as they drop low, we see Lighty die actually, should keep that as well. No, JB dying too, this
JB
might be a
goes
disaster.
Down. Nerf Clap about to go down as well, just can't hold on as a warrior tank, does what he can to heal through it. Trinket procs again, Yoda's up there as well, but it looks like a full team wipe comes out of Method NA at the last second. Another unfortunate choke. Last moments of the dungeon, and Method EU maintain their undefeated streak in terms of full series. I mean, that was a
heartbreaking loss on the side of Method NA, and twice now, really, in the series, where they had it in their hands, they had the Bloodlust available to them, they got the pull set up correctly there, and they just weren't able to finish it out here, Tettles.
Yeah, it was really gifted them by Method EU, though. With all the struggles that they had on Soulbound Goliath, they pulled Matron Brindle into Soulbound Goliath, had to end up resetting the boss, lost a lot of people there. That ended up costing them a ton of time, and they were really kind of gifted this win by Method EU, and they ended up just throwing it away there at the end. We actually saw Method EU's pathing was a little bit better. They always pulled a little bit bigger and a little bit more aggressively, but we do see now end up going here and kind of throwing Method in a really good chance of taking this dungeon just because of how they ended up dealing with Soulbound Goliath. You obviously see this really big pull on the side of Method NA that they were actually still pulling really proactively, and I would say Method NA's pathing was actually pretty good, but Method EU's pathing was just a little bit better, and they kept in the instance, even though they did have a little bit of a hiccup in the middle part of the instance, and it allowed them to actually come back and still win.
Yeah, at that point, especially that pull on Lord and Lady Waycrest there, where they immediately started pulling into the boss fight, even though they had a little bit of trash left remaining to them. That gained them a pretty substantial advantage here, but Nagur, if they executed properly in that last pull, they should have had it.
Method NA definitely should have had this because of the struggles that Method EU had earlier with, as you just mentioned, this one pull where they had to reset, just cost them so much time. So Method NA definitely should have had this one. They did have the death advantage, they had the 20 seconds or 25 seconds advantage. So just right as the mobs were about to die, on 10% HP, we just had the whole team dying and losing time, just having a full team wipe coming in on this very last trash pack is just heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's something you just hate to see as well, and it's not the first time we were talking about it as well, Sloot, where previously, the very first time we saw Method EU, when they went into Waycrest, they did that pull, they had their wipe when they didn't have it on 18, but going into a 19, they were just so much cleaner.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's the kind of team that definitely beats themselves up over any small mistakes they make, and that's something they probably went in and hammered down in practice a lot. And I mean, Method NA certainly had the advantage at the 25 seconds, the Bloodlust, but it was just too much at the end. They kind of stuck around too much in that foyer area that we're seeing right here. And yeah, I mean, Tettles, you know, I know you saw this from the back a lot.
Yeah, so basically the survivalists end up getting their cast off, and it puts that dot on the whole entire group. You see everybody dipping incredibly low, and you end up having the Grievous, just the survivalist dot, and everything else taking everybody down, and they end up just actually wiping there just at the very end, and just as they were about to clutch the win. JB ended up falling. We saw Lighty fall a little bit earlier, and then we just had a couple more people falling down, and then it just ended up being the end for Method NA there in the Method v Method deathmatch.
Was that both survivalists getting their cast off as well there that just brought everybody down? Because we saw it one earlier.
I didn't see if it was both of them, but definitely one of them got it off, and then everybody was just sitting really high on Grievous stacks and not being able to be topped up. Those survivalists are actually very scary, and under normal circumstances, and doing that whole room even with Bloodlust is incredibly scary.
Without a doubt. And as we take a look at our bracket, we will be seeing Method NA falling down to that lower finals, while Method EU moves on to the grand finals here. And so